welcome. You know, we often say this person needs no introduction, but in the case of Christian Louboutin, he really does need no introduction. This is the man who makes the most seductive, beautiful red sole shoes that we all love so much. So I'm going to start with a question of how did you, and when did you first realize that shoes were important to you, that you maybe wanted to do shoe design?
I was pretty young, I would say. Well, that's different. I started to draw shoes when I was around 12.
Okay.
12, 13, 14, etc. But at that time, it was a bit of almost like a nervous tic, I would say, something like that. I liked it. I reproducing always shoes in profile, but I never thought that it was actually a job,
right,
a work.
Right.
And so I just liked to draw shoes. But I never connected. It took me a long time to connect that actually what I was doing was probably a work.
Right.
But voilà, so to answer to your question, I started to design shoes, but just thinking I like to draw shoes when I was 12, 13.
And at what point then in your trajectory did you start to think, maybe I can learn how to do this as a career?
So what exactly happened is that I used to go to, so I was born and raised in Paris, and I used to go to this museum, which used to be called the Museum of African and Oceanic Arts,
yes,
that you know we're discussing
yes,
before. And so at the entry of the museum, there was a sketch, a little bit like that, I mean not like this one,
yeah,
but a sketch, and it was crossed like that in red.
Yes.
And so it was, I could understand that it was like a shoe of women, but it was a spiky type of stiletto, so basically a pump from the 50s.
Yes.
But it was just a signalétique, and it was basically saying it's forbidden to high heels. And the reason is
yes,
because the museum had beautiful floors, mosaic floors, and then precious wood floors, which still has.
Yeah.
And so in the 50s, that type of shoe was having a tip in metal.
Yeah.
And thin heel in metal, so it would break the floors.
Yeah.
So it had been in the 50s forbidden
yes,
to wear that type of shoes.
I remember seeing that kind of sign around.
But being born in the mid-60s, I had no idea even about that shoe, I mean that type of shoe. So I was looking at that drawing and thinking, it's funny, it's a women's shoe, but it's not existing. And on the top of that, it's forbidden, God knows why. But it's basically really that first drawing which made me understand that most things are drawn first, and everything you see at one point has been drawn. So it could have been forbidden to, I don't know, cars,
yes,
and I may have designed
yes,
cars. So the first thing was really to reproduce that drawing, and I was really questioning myself about that drawing, but it made me understand that literally everything starts by a sketch.
yes,
And any environment, if you look around you, everything has been thought by someone, has been designed, and has been processed.
yes.
And so that's what exactly happened to me. I started to do that shoe, reproduce that shoe, doing difference in the shoe, but it was always in profile with a heel, and I was changing the style a bit, the colors, etc. But it was very much that. And so that was, when I was doing that, I was really not thinking more than, you know, I was bored in school, to be perfectly honest. So I like to draw my shoes, to do different colors, etc. And to stop to be bored. So because of that drawing and because of all my drawings that I was doing, at school I started to be like considered a bit like a cuckoo type of child, and always doing like those sketches. And because of that, I started to have a lot of, some of people from the school would give me information about school. So very quickly I ended up being an expert in shoes, not even being so obsessed by that. I was obsessed by drawing, not obsessed by shoes really, at the very beginning. But then when I got all this information about shoes, I started to really love shoes even more and more. And one day, someone, I don't remember who actually, I should thank the person, but I don't remember who it was. Someone gave me a book and said, you know, you who like shoes, I have this for you. I brought this back from Bordeaux. and the book was a gold cover, and it was written Roger Vivier, it was the name, of an exhibition of this person that I had never heard of, called Roger Vivier, and it was a retrospective of his work in Bordeaux, which is south of France.
Yes.
And I looked, and suddenly I thought, oh my God, it's actually great to do shoes, and you can definitely go all the way and finish them, and it's a beautiful job. So it's because also of that book that I thought, okay, I've been drawing, thinking I could do better, and it exists, and it could be a job. So from lying at school, I have to tell you one other thing. When you're a kid, people, adult, grown up, are always asking, so when you're older, what do you want to do? What are you going to do? And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's pretty traumatizing for kids, because you're like, okay, I don't know what I want to do later. I just want to have fun right now. So why do I have to think of all these things? And so my best friend from school was absolutely traumatized, because she just didn't know what she wanted to do, and she was like, what can I say? I said, just say you want to be a pilot. She said, are you crazy? A pilot? Why a pilot? I said, I don't know. In the plane, it's very nice. She says, no. I say, vétérinaire, doctor for animals. She said, I hate animals. I said, I don't know, say something. And she says, but I realized that it was complicated for some people. Yeah. And me, I was actually lying, because when people were asking me that, I was always saying, I want to do shoes. So people are like, okay. I'm thinking, okay, poor one. And but so this sort of almost lie started to become a reality thanks to that book. So thanks to this person, I would say, the work of that person. And then so when I turned probably 16 to 17, I was really dedicated to design shoes. But my dedication to shoes was going in a very specific direction. I wanted to design shoes for showgirls.
Yes.
So it had nothing to see with fashion. My really first focus was designing shoes for girls in music hall.
And you got to know some of these women and saw what kind of shoes they wore. And you told me once some funny story about the kind of things they would put in the shoes to make them more comfortable.
Yes, yeah. I've been so my first job, I would say, was I was 17, and I started to work for Les Folies Bergères. So I was an intern for less than a year at the Folies Bergères. And so I've never designed shoes at the Folies Bergères, because it's a complicated thing to do shoes. The process is long, it's very expensive, etc. You have a lot of elements that you can add. Let's say if you want to do a dress, with very little you can do a dress. If you really want to do a shoe which works, which is not dangerous, you have to have a lot of elements which are very costly. Yes. So for this reason, I didn't do any shoes for the Folies Bergères, but I've learned a lot about shoes, about the balance, the importance of the balance, the arch, the reinforcement, a lot of technical things, thanks to these girls. Because for a showgirl, first the musical in Paris, so I was at the Folies Bergères, so you have this huge staircase.
Coming down the staircase.
Is going down, and we have a very important expression in French. Any French person, if you say that, would tell you the name of the person who said it. And so in French, it's l'ai-je bien descendu, which means did I go down correctly? So it's in reference to stairs. Yeah. So basically, a very important element for showgirls and their training every day is to go down the stairs. Yes. Because in real life, if you go downstairs, you look at your feet and you look at the stairs and you look where you put your feet. In the dream world of the Folies Bergères, of music hall, you look in front of you, you smile, and you don't see your feet. Yes. So you basically learn to bang the back of your foot to see exactly where is the arch of the stair. And so for a showgirl to be able to go down the stairs properly is really an achievement. Yes. So I don't remember what I'm talking about.
It's one of the ways in which you learned about how you can move in shoes.
So all these things, all this to say that showgirls have been really a very important experience for me for my work, because they know what they're talking about when they're talking about shoes. When they're talking about men too, they know. But let's say, to go back to shoes, they know what they're talking about when they're talking shoes.
And underneath the ball of the foot, there's a lot of pressure if you're wearing high heels and performing on stage. So what did they use to cushion that?
Okay, she wants to.
I'm trying to, because it's so
she wants to put me in a direction of something I've been telling her. Yes. So
it's just such a cool story.
So as an intern, I was doing everything. Apart from designing shoes, which I never did at the time, I was doing everything. And so helping people, etc. And I was sent also to buy the food, the drinks, the things, And so I would buy a huge amount of veal carpaccio. And so every day I had to buy veal carpaccio, and they were always making jokes saying, it needs to be kasher, it needs to be kasher, which means with no blood, etc. And so, okay, yeah, kasher, veal carpaccio, kasher. And so one day I said, why does everybody eat veal carpaccio all the time here? It's such a weird thing. And they say, you're so stupid, we're not eating them. I said, what do you mean by that? I say, it's to put in the shoes. And so basically, the veal carpaccio is making a cushion. That's why it needed to be kasher with no blood, of course. So what they were doing, they were cutting a piece of the veal carpaccio and putting it in that part here. So when the pressure of the weight of the person goes on that low part, there was a type of natural cushion.
Yes.
But of course, it had to be replaced every day because it was not it was healthy, I guess, but it was not. The smell was a bit so-so.
Well, it was not a high-tech method of cushioning. Now, so when and how did you start your own label?
I started at the very end of 1991.
Okay.
And I started, so I have been working for different people.
Yes.
I mean, I worked for the Folies Bergère, but that was like a few months. And then after, I started to work for different companies. One being Charles Jourdan when I was 18 for a year, so I had to move to the south of France. And then I worked for different companies in Italy most of the time, and for French companies. I worked also for, je sais pas quoi moi, Maud Frison, Sylvia Resi, Chanel, Saint Laurent, etc. Armani, Lere, Lari, many companies. And then what happened? Why was I fed up about that? I don't remember exactly what happened. Yes, exactly. And then in 1988, Roger Vivier, who was alive at the time, so Monsieur Roger Vivier, not the brand,
right.
the man. Roger asked me to be his assistant for the exhibition that he had at the Musée des Arts de la Mode in Paris.
Yes.
And it was his retrospective, and he was 80 years old. So I was very, very happy and very thrilled because he was a man why I had really wanted to design shoes. So I said, yes. And I worked for a year and had the best fun. He was a charming
Wasn't he
man.
really charming?
Yeah, adorable person and extremely talented and so sweet. Anyway, so I worked with him, and then when the exhibition stopped, I just thought, I can't work for anybody now. I'm not going to find someone so inspiring. And working for him, I never designed any shoes. I didn't design shoes for Folies Bergère. I didn't design shoes for Roger Vivier. I just was his assistant.
Yes.
So secretary, etc., doing everything, but not designing. It was really about his work. But for me, being early 20s, looking at someone and looking at the work of that person was so fantastic. I was perfectly happy like that. So anyway, when the exhibition stopped, I just couldn't imagine myself working for anybody else. Yeah. So I stopped. So that was 1989. And then I started to do landscaping because I always, not always, but let's say a little bit after my 16 or 17, I was interested in garden. And so I started to do landscaping, so a landscape architect. And but for some reason, it's a fantastic work, but you have to be patient.
Yes.
You know, you put something this, and this is a tree, and you know, before it goes to that ceiling, it's going to take you 20 years.
Right.
And so when you're 25 or something, you like,
So
please
watching it,
grow.
wait, grow.
What is happening to you? So I was too impatient to enjoy it completely. And so I was missing actually my heart, which was really designing shoes. And, but I just didn't want to work for anybody. And so totally by accident, what happened is that I always loved objects, so I was collecting objects. And so I was going into that gallery where there was this antique dealer doing specialty of Swedish 1910, 1920 furniture called Eric Philippe. And I was trying to buy a lamp of Arbus, which is later, French designer, and he wouldn't sell it to me. So I had to go back and forth, and to try to buy that lamp. So he was so fed up to have me there. So one day he says, "What about your shoes?" I say, I stopped. And he said, "Why?" So I explained him, and he says, "But why don't you start your own thing?" I said, "Well, yeah, I mean, not completely excited because I was afraid." And I was afraid, I guess. And but he did everything to get rid of me. So he said, at the end of the galleries, there is a photo gallery. They sell it. Why don't you do a shop? And I thought, that's not such a bad idea. And then 2 or 3 days after, I was having dinner with my 2 best friends, and I spoke about that anecdote, and they say, "Yeah, let's do it together." So the 3 of us started the company, but I started the company with 1 shop. And to me, so as you are a student, from what I understand, that's an important thing for me, which I would have never started to show my work, let's say through in a suitcase and open it, and then people say, I don't like this, that, etc. To me, it was important to start with the shoe, but also the box, in a way. I always love, for instance, jewelry, and I always find quite fascinating when you, for instance, if you offer a jewelry, the moment where you open the box. There is this type of unveiling, which I always loved. And so to me, the box of the shoe, being the store, speaks also of your work. So it's easier, in a way, to show the environment where you're showing what you do is actually having an impact, having an impact.
Absolutely.
Always. So to me, it was important to have this impactful thing. I was showing with having a shop immediately. I started the company with the shop. I didn't even have a fax, nothing. I didn't know how it was working really, but I had the shop, and I had a type of cash machine which was not working very well, but I started like that. And but I could see that people were looking at the shoes, the first clients, etc., but they also were looking at the environment of the shoes. The shop, I had designed the shop. Well, actually, the picture of which was there at one point. I had painted the shop, I had designed the shop myself, etc. So I knew exactly what I wanted, and it was making part of my work. So this environment were totally making part of my work. And I remember, for instance, the first buyers who came, they were not coming to see a collection. They were coming to see a world, a very little world, but a world already. And it totally makes a difference because you already have a larger part of your identity which is shown to clients but also to buyers. So they like it, great. They don't like it, whatever, you know. You already have your identity, you've been working about that, and people do understand and in general respect that. So the first buyer who came, they were like, okay, if we don't buy, we don't buy, but the guy is existing already. So it puts you in a very, very different perspective.
A different perspective on it. Yeah, exactly. And how did your work evolve over time And at what point and under what circumstances did you suddenly think of the red sole?
So it's two questions.
Two questions, yes.
Okay, so what is the question?
The first one, how did your work evolve over time? You had your little shop and you started creating and presenting it.
So how did it evolve?
Did you have a silhouette which was sort of your look, your high heels that you sort of tended to stay
so
with?
I would say that if I sort of look in a way, to, let's say those decades, I started by very, very dressy shoes, very, very dressy shoes, and I went to very, very bare shoes, very nude shoes in a way. And so I would say that I started to dress the foot, and I went in the direction of undressing the foot. So that's been, I would say, is a big difference.
Fascinating.
I think it's a big evolution.
Yes, yeah, that's fascinating. And at what point, under what circumstances, did you suddenly have this red sole idea?
So I started in 91, the end of 91. And so I sketch everything. And so I never learned at school, like let's say fashion or fashion design or things like that. So I guess that because of that, I never had a type of strict way of designing.
Yes.
So, I never had a billboard or mood board or whatever and thinking, okay, the collection needs to be, it's about this, it's about that, I never was really that structured. I mean, I am not structured. And so what I was doing is sketching, and sometimes I was having things in mind that I started, I was influenced by things and I started to sketch. So what happened with the red sole is that I had in mind actually an American artist, but a larger scope of it, which was pop art in general.
Yeah.
So pop art, and because of pop art, there was also Andy Warhol. I was thinking of Andy Warhol. So I started to draw shoes, and the shoes were really in pop colors and only pop colors.
Yeah.
And I was doing the same shoe sketching it with repetition of different colors, a bit like the serigraphy of Andy Warhol, etc. And but what I do when I sketch, so I was thinking of Andy Warhol. I have a very specific painting in mind, which is called, I think, Flowers.
Okay.
But when I sketch, I can be influenced by things, but I never have documents next to me. So when I was sketching, thinking of Andy Warhol, pop art, flowers, etc., I did a shoe, which is the sketch which was there, called Pensée.
Yeah.
And so I called the shoe Pansy, and to me it was exactly,
Pansy,
it was in reference to the color palette of Andy Warhol, the pop art in general, and also a flower.
Yeah.
So I drew the shoe, and when the shoe arrived, and when I did the fittings, etc., I was happy of the shoe existing. Then I looked at the painting.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that I was really having in mind, so Warhol, what I just said. So I drew that shoe, which is a Mary Jane, pointy Mary Jane, with the Mary Jane, so the bride,
with
the strap, the big strap, and the flower. And the flower has 3 petals, and it's outlined in a different color. And the bouton, the middle, it's the same color of the outline. So in my drawing, it was exactly like that. And it was full of colors. And so when I tried the shoe on, it looked good, actually. It looked good. The fitting was good. So I was happy. But I had the drawing, and then I had the real shoe. And looking at back and forth, there was something more powerful in the drawing, I would say. And I thought, what is it? And I couldn't really figure it out till the moment where I took the shoe. So all the shoes were really with a lot of colors.
Yeah.
And so I turned the shoe, so profile, this shoe. So profile, it looked like my drawing, and I was happy. Front, it looked like my drawing, I was happy. But from the back, you just had the heel, and then a sole, and the sole was black. And then suddenly, there was a lot of black, and there was no black in my drawing. I thought, if there was a way to erase this, I would see if I would be happy. And so Sarah, the girl who was trying on the shoes, had finished we had finished the fitting. So she was painting her nails with a nail polish. And so I said, give me your nail polish, I want to try something. And I remember she had like 2 nails done. She was like, okay, let me wait, let me finish. I said, please, give me your nail polish. So we had a bit of a fight. I got the nail polish. She was like, I can't find it again, look, what do I do? We were in the countryside, right, in the factory in Italy. And then I polished very quickly the sole, and then suddenly it was exactly like my drawing. Yeah. So I thought, okay, it pops up the same way. And I always try to be as possible close from my primary drawing. Yeah. So I thought, okay, that looks very nice. That's exactly like my drawing. So I'm going to keep it like that. Then, as it was a winter season, I thought, okay, I'm going to do the sole in colors. As it's winter, it should be green, Christmas. And then I thought, for some reason, red looks better. Mm. And also, red looks better. But also, in the early 90s, most women in France were dressed in black.
Yes.
And you could always hear, so I was in the shop selling, I could always hear, I only wear black. I don't do colors, I hate colors, or I don't like colors, depending on the character, but I don't do colors, And so I was it was quite interrogative for me to see the relationship with colors. And so I remember going to that woman saying, you say you don't like color, but you have red. Mm-hmm. And she said, but it's different. Mm-hmm. It's red. I said, red is a color. She said, yes, but it's different. Red is a color, but it's not a color. You see, we have red, but yeah. Well, so I thought really, if people, even for people who don't like color, red is another type of category in a way.
Yes.
So I thought if it has to be a color, it should definitely be red. And then I really liked red with everything. So I started with that color, thinking I may change color, but then it became really a sign of recognition of my brand, and then it became a trademark. Yeah. And I thought, okay, it's no longer in my hands anymore. But I don't regret it.
No, it's so fabulous. Well, I mean, in the whole history of color, actually the 3 colors that were first used by Neanderthals were red, black, and white. Centuries, millennia before blue or green or any other colors came in. Yeah, red's a special color.
Well, it is a special color.
Well, related to red and its symbolism, I wondered if you could talk about in what ways can shoes be sexy or erotic or sensuous?
It was very interesting. So for the first 2 years, I was selling in my first store in Paris. And it was always very interesting to see the relationship with nudity that women have with shoes. So for instance, I always love very, very low cleavage, décolleté, so the décolleté of the shoe, which is a technical word.
Toe cleavage.
Toe cleavage, so you see a little bit of this part.
The cracks, yes.
The cracks. And so early 90s, for some reason, a lot of people didn't like that. And would tell me, there is something, I feel almost naked. Mm-hmm. And
I remember
and then the person would buy a sandal, and I say, sorry, what is the difference? You have all the feet sticking out. Don't you feel more naked? And people would always say no. Right. And so it has to see with suggestion. Yes. If you are showing a little bit, there is something, the suggestion is literally more powerful than showing everything. Yeah. So it's often the case, it's almost a difference between erotism, which is a suggestion, and pornography. So I think that there is the same type of relationship. You show less, you suggest more. You show everything, people get bored.
It's true. A lot of experts in sexuality, from Casanova to Freud, have talked about the attraction of concealment, that a completely naked foot or a foot in flip-flop is just naked. But if you're just showing a little bit, the toe cleavage or the back of the heel, it becomes more like a striptease, more like a
Exactly.
play
You
of
know,
seeing a little bit.
It helps, it provokes and it pushes the imagination of people looking at it. So it's a power of suggestion.
Now, we have some questions here, and we only have a few more minutes, but let's see. What advice would you give a young shoe designer?
To a young shoe designer, you know, I would probably say that. What advice should I give to a young shoe designer? To really, I mean, I think that, but it's not only about shoes. It's in general, is really you have to work. You know what I started to say. Everybody's influenced. Everybody has influences. You go to a movie, you go to a theater, you go to a play, you go to see an exhibition, you are going to be influenced. The music, the thing, And the only way to show who you are is actually, a lot of people are going to have the same influence, are going to see the same show, are going to see Beyonce shaking, etc. And so all of this is becoming a popular culture, a different culture, But the way to show who you are, which is important if you do fashion, if you create things, is to express yourself and to show who you are, what you like, what you are about. I would say is to, for instance, not have document. I started to speak about that.
Yeah.
Let's say, you see, for instance, when I was thinking of that flower shoe, Pensée, I drew it. And then when I looked at the painting, the flower, my drawing has 3 petals, and it's outlined in the different colors. When I looked at the real painting of Andy Warhol, the petals are 4. There is no outline. It's completely, it has nothing in common. But still, I was fully inspired by it and thinking to respect it. But the fact to not to have any document, it obliges you to think your way, and it goes, and through your own filter of your own memory, you are going to retranscribe something your way. If you have the document and you look at the document, you are going to reproduce something which is not yours and which didn't have the time to go through your memory, through who you are, what you like, etc. So you are going to basically do what I would call a copy. And everybody will come out literally with the same thing. Why? Is because it hasn't penetrated yourself and coming back out with your hands with something else which is talking about you. So I would say that probably, that's what I would say as
I've never heard anyone say that.
Advice.
That's a very, very cool description of the creative process.
You can be influenced by anything. It's totally legitimate, but don't systematically have a document and which is inspirational document. You should print it in your memory and then come out with what you remember, because that's going to be the essence of what you've been seeing in that inspiration object, song, whatever you're thinking.
Fascinating. That is a very unique and important piece of advice.
You think it's a good advice?
I think it's really, really interesting. I've never heard anyone say that. That is so cool. Time for another couple. This feeds into the other one. What interests you right now, and how is it feeding into your work? Are there any certain things, I mean, like we were talking before, you travel a lot. Is that something that feeds into your work, or is there something else that does?
Well, everything is interesting in a way. Everything is interesting. But I would say that there is one thing when I'm very, very sensitive, always was, but more it goes, more I keep it in an important way, is artisanship. Artisanship. And the reason is that I've always traveled, always loved objects, always brought objects, And a lot of objects that I've been collecting for years that I haven't seen for years have been staying in my memory and has been retranscribed. But that was a way that I've been quite inspired for a long time. Now I would add that it's important. The world has changed and a lot of things get lost. And if you see, I have nothing against globalization. I mean, it is what it is, so it's not, it's not to this. That's not what I want to discuss. But in a way, it is important to keep some element of different cultures, and the privilege of traveling and seeing different cultures, different architectures, different way of living, whatever, there is so much diversity, and that a lot of things get lost, and that makes me very sad.
Yeah.
A lot of technique, a lot of like weaving techniques,
Yeah.
The ikat, the way it was done, it doesn't exist anymore in some countries, etc. A lot of technical, artisanal things which are providing terracotta, providing jewelry, beautiful artisanship is disappearing. And so I'm very sensitive to that topic, and I actually, object is an inspirational thing, but also to work also with artisans.
Yes.
Because let's say after 28 years now, I have in a way the privilege to be able to do things, to do shoes which are going to be done by thousands and thousands and thousands of pairs, and some shoes which are going to request a very specific type of technique, and there will be few pairs, but I can still mix that through stores, through events, etc. I can have a part of my work which is really, I wouldn't say industrial, but a bigger volume, and a part of my work which is smaller volume. But it permits us to work with people who would lose those qualities, and this quality needs to be, given back to different generations, etc. But also, even for me, it's almost like a laboratory. Sometimes you're doing something that you cannot reproduce. I do something that I cannot reproduce more than 2, 3, 4 pairs or whatever.
Yes.
I'm still very happy of that.
Yes.
I would do that instead of thinking, okay, I can do 1,000 pairs, so let's forget about it. And I would never also reproduce, let's say, if I've been working with artisans doing really beautiful carving, I'm not going to say, okay, do me one carving and then I will cut it and do it, and then I will laser it and give it to a bigger industry.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't do that. I will be inspired by that thing, but I would do something else. So it's a laboratory, artisanship also, people who know how to do things with their hands, etc. It's an important thing, but also it's, to me, it's a laboratory which permits me to drift again and to also go to a second part or to another part of my collections.
Yeah. That's very beautiful. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Please join me in thanking Christian Louboutin. That was really lovely. Thank you.
But have a good evening.
That was super inspiring. I love that about the artisanship. We can't let it disappear
No.
in the sort of homogenization of the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you.